Once upon a time there was a poor woodcutter who lived with his wife and 2 children in a small house on the edge of a dense forest. The 2 children, Hansel and Gretel, were siblings who were always inseparable. Their birth mother had passed away long ago, and their father had remarried a cold and cruel woman. Life grew increasingly difficult as food supplies dwindled, and hunger became a constant fear. The father did his best to provide for his family by cutting wood, but the harsh winter and food scarcity made it impossible for him to earn enough to feed everyone. Each night Hansel and Gretel would hear their father sigh with worry, but what frightened them most was the sharp voice of their stepmother. One night, as Hansel and Gretel lay in bed, they overheard a conversation between their father and stepmother. Her voice was harsh.
"We can no longer feed these children. If we keep this up, we will all starve. Tomorrow morning, we will take them into the forest and leave them there."
The father hesitated, but was eventually convinced by his wife's cruel words. Hansel and Gretel trembled with fear, but Hansel came up with a plan. Before dawn, he sneaked outside, collected small white pebbles, and hid them in his pocket. The next morning, their father led them into the forest. Along the way, Hansel discreetly dropped the white pebbles onto the ground. As night fell, their father abandoned them with a promise to return. But Hansel and Gretel knew they had been left behind. Under the moonlight, the white pebbles glowed, leading them safely back home. The stepmother was furious when she saw them return. She hissed.
"This time, they will not escape."
She pressured her husband to take them into the forest again. Hansel tried to gather pebbles, but the door had been locked. Left with no choice, he crumbled pieces of bread and scattered them along the way. This time, their father took them deeper into the woods. When night fell, Hansel and Gretel tried to follow the breadcrumb trail, but they found nothing. The forest birds had eaten every crumb. The children were truly lost. Hansel and Gretel wandered the forest for days, starving and exhausted. They faced many hardships: the cold, eerie nights, the howling of wolves echoing in the darkness, and the thick trees that blocked out the sunlight. Many times they thought they couldn't go on, but Hansel always encouraged Gretel, and together they pressed forward. Then they stumbled upon a peculiar house made entirely of candy, gingerbread walls, a chocolate roof, and sugar glass windows. Starving, they rushed over and began nibbling on the delicious treats. Suddenly, a voice called out,
"Who is eating my house?"
From inside, an old woman appeared. She seemed kind, but her eyes gleamed with something sinister.
"Poor children, come in. I will take good care of you."
Hansel and Gretel had no idea they had fallen into the trap of a wicked witch. As soon as they entered, the door slammed shut. Hansel was locked inside an iron cage. The witch clapped her hands gleefully.
"I will fatten you up and make a fine meal."
Day after day, the witch forced Hansel to eat. But the clever boy devised a trick. Every time she checked to see if he had grown plump, he would stick out a small bone instead of his finger. The blind witch could not tell the difference. Gretel was forced to do all the housework, cleaning, cooking, and serving the witch. But she never stopped looking for a way to save her brother. She carefully observed the witch's actions and listened to her words, hoping to find a weakness. After many days, the witch grew impatient.
"Plump or not, I will cook you today. Gretel, light the oven."
Gretel trembled as she obeyed, but then she had an idea. When the witch bent down to check the fire, Gretel mustered all her strength and pushed the old woman into the oven, slamming the door shut. A terrible scream echoed, then silence. Only ashes remained. Hansel and Gretel embraced, tears streaming down their faces. Searching the house, they discovered a treasure trove of gold and jewels. They filled their pockets and fled the dreadful place. On their way home, a great swan carried them across a wide river. They retraced the paths they had wandered before, recalling the hunger and fear they had endured. But this time, they were not alone. When they finally reached home, they found their father sitting sadly at the doorstep. He looked much older, thin, and worn. The moment he saw them, he ran to embrace them. With tears in his eyes, he said,
"I have regretted everything. Your stepmother is gone, and I only have you two left."
The siblings hugged their father, and from that day on, they lived happily ever after. Hansel and Gretel had not only overcome great trials, but also learned valuable lessons about courage, intelligence, and the strength of family love. Their story became a legend, passed down from generation to generation, a symbol of perseverance and unbreakable bonds.